This is the Game Design Live Chat. I'm Carla Kopp. I'm a designer, developer, and publisher. And this is the fantastic Daniel Zayas. Not only does he work for Long Pack Games, he also runs the Tabletop Backer Party, and he's a game designer as well. So you've done Cutie Meets Patootie. Is that it?
When Cutie Met Patootie.
When Cutie Met Patootie. Mechanisms, and there's several other ones. There's Christmas lights.
My first published one would have been, Chad Elkins gets this credit, is that before Mechanisms was published and before customers had When Cutie Met Patootie, Christmas lights, I do have a module designed within that. So he gets credit for my very first published work.
Yeah. So Daniel is a very interesting person. If you do want to join the conversation after this, we have a Discord at weirddraftgames.com/Discord. But Daniel can tell you more about him because, who's the best person to tell autobiography than him?
Yeah, I wear many hats. I don't know how interesting I am, but I do have a lot of experiences within tabletop games that maybe can help people.
Okay, so this, the subject of this live chat is the physicality of games. To start off,
interesting. I'm not interesting, but that is super interesting to me.
So, why is physicality important in games?
Why is physicality important in games? Well, tabletop games have this funny thing about them in that they are not only like a communal experience, but like you are holding things, you are touching things as a direct interaction with that experience, right? And I think that sounds like, I don't want to sound like a college professor, right? But the fact that you will touch the things as part of the core experience means that must be one of the most important things you do as a publisher. I would say that not as a game designer necessarily, but the publisher will always deal with this circumstance, and sometimes that does overflow obviously into game design, but it's a very, very different skill set than even like if you're good at math so you make a cool game. That does not take into account the product design element. That is I think a completely different skill set that most of the time the publisher will try and loop in if the design has not progressed as far as that. So,
yeah, I'd agree. Right? So I think it's like the physicality is just so important because like if you didn't care about the physicality, you could just play a video game.
Sure. Yeah. You could play a video game, you could go outside, and even that, like if you wanted to, throw a ball into a mitt, you're talking about the physicality of a game where if you threw something else other than a ball, it might not work as well, right? Like just thinking in terms of sports, even there is an immense importance in what is being touched and what is being handled.
So, what are some of the other different important physical aspects to board games?
Yeah, so I mean, you could go through the material that is used. Like, why is this meeple plastic versus wood, right? Is that a cost thing, or is it actually like there is a in the case of this, I like to bring this one up. In the case of like Gamelin, right? Gamelin came out with the item meeples, right? And the item meeples, they had to hold things in their little meeple hands and wear things. And they had this discussion about, and we didn't, Longpack did not make this, by the way, as a disclaimer, but I have had long conversations about why they went that route where they have plastic meeples instead of the traditional wood meeples. And it came down to that they would have to constantly put things in and out of the meeples as part of the gameplay. And over time, obviously a natural material will wear down, and they didn't want that to affect anyone's gameplay, even on their 30th play or whatever of one of the games. So now all of the item meeples games, right? All of the games that come with item meeples, and I think they've at this point expanded past games to include the functionality of item meeples. Anyway, so those are plastic for a reason. But then also you get into like, when should I use magnets in like in the case of Planet, right? Which we did make. And how does that even, that is a long, we could have an entire talk about the construction of Planet and where it started and where it is now. And we might get into that actually as part of some of the questions. But the physicality of the games will include the material. It will include the size of components. I mean, you can imagine any game can technically be played. You could play Monopoly with tweezers and still technically play the same game, but why is it that big, right? And so, yeah, so the sizing, the materials, and also the functionality comes into play too. Is can I play this game with cards versus dice, right? Like I could technically flip a card, and that will change actually some of the gameplay elements. I can flip a card, it has a number on it, and that will technically be like rolling a die, but why did I do that instead? Like in Welcome to, you flip a card, it gives you information, but why did I do that instead of rolling a die to give me information, right? Yeah, those are all like long conversations that publishers have about why I'm doing this thing in a game.
Yeah, you bring up the dice versus cards idea, and I love when like I have an idea for in a game and like it is a dice, but then I take like dice to deck,
Sure.
like, and then you have like you could have like 6 of the cards, so it's like the same probability for the first roll or the first card draw, but then like you know what's already
And you
been
mess
drawn.
with the math, right? You mess with the math by doing that. Kemet has one of the best battle systems. I think like when it came out, right? This is a little bit of time ago now, but when Kemet came out, it was one of the best like attack systems that I had seen at the time. And all it was you have this limited set of deck of cards, and it has defense and attack on it, and you will choose to spend, like, I think you have a hand of 3 cards or something, and you will choose to spend one of those 3 cards, but that card won't come back to you until you have exhausted your deck, right? And so you have to kind of strategically, like, okay, in this moment, I think that, and also knowing what they have spent, right? I think they've spent such and such cards. So if I play this against them, I will win, but also it won't be such a, an overkill that I will be able to have that experience or still continue and win the game.
So Kathleen had a question. Have you seen bad product design kill a game?
Yeah, so this is funny. I'm not going to say kill a game. That's a very subjective thing, right? Like, because people enjoy games no matter what, right? Like the thing that someone hates is another person's favorite game. So it's hard to say that something has been killed because games are sold and there's, market success versus could it have been better? And honestly, like even like, you know this for sure, but like publishers and designers will like go back to their old designs, be like, I would have done so many things different had I known what I know now. So all of that being said, there's a fiddliness in older games that I think are getting like worked out or like better developed today. That if Twilight Struggle was made today, and honestly, like now you play Twilight Struggle, and I don't want to like, you can technically still play Twilight Struggle on tabletop. I get it, but like, the digital version of Twilight Struggle feels so much better because I'm not grabbing these little tiny pieces that will represent information all across the board. And again, this goes back to like, why is it so small? Would I need tweezers to put it on the right spot? The same argument for like Castles of Burgundy. There's, I think what's happening today that wasn't happening maybe even as early as like a year ago or 2 years ago, is that a lot of the fiddliness in games that honestly overcomplicates the experience and maybe drives away this new demographic of gateway gamers and broadening the playing field, right? Broadening the demographic, is that we are working out the fiddliness in games, right? Everything, all of that is getting developed out of games right now. is that if I have to have so many components, even on the headiest of Euro games that are the new ones that are coming out, I'm not saying anything even like a year old, but the new ones that are coming out are definitely working out this idea of like, how can I add some, okay, here's a good example. Teotihuacan. I don't want to ramble, but Teotihuacan is a really, really good example of this could have technically just been a flat tile that presents information. I could just stack it, and that might work, but also it'll be very fiddly. It won't be a good table presence for people. That's another thing, by the way. It won't be a good table presence for people who go around at conventions or even at a game store and see it laid out. So what they did was they said, okay, we'll make it into tiles. The physical, it has nothing to do with the game design. It's 100% a physical decision to say, these will be tiles that present the same information on it, and there will be a 3D element that we can now build this pyramid, which will then be again, a visual cue to people to be interested in it, right? So even like the heaviest of Euro games are adding this physicality in that removes some of the fiddliness of older games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree that like a lot of the fiddliness, like I just can't deal with it anymore of older games. Like after experiencing like so many games that don't have it.
Yeah, I'm wondering how many people actually get, and I'm going to pick on Twilight Struggle and also probably Castle of Burgundy, but like how many people get those to the table? What is it? What was the other, the Vlada game, that's Empires or whatever, it's a civilization game, but I'm missing but that one, it has the same fiddliness problem in the design, that now you play the app and like it cuts the game in like, a third of the time or whatever, right? So, which is another thing, is like time to set up, time to play the game, time to take it down, like all of that is impacting game design right now.
Yeah, like someone brought up like last week, like having the setup time on the box. Like should the time on the box be separated into like setup and like actual gameplay time? But like if I saw like a long setup time, like that's not gonna
Yeah,
be
no one
really,
will do that. No one will do that because it dissuades people from buying the game, right? Like anything that dissuades people from buying the game, no publisher would willingly sign up for that. Because but to the credit of that idea, like you also want the setup time to be as quick as possible, like as seamless and very, even the again, this is like even going into complicated games, there are now like super in-depth diagrams for this is how you lay out every single thing. And you'll see this in like the good games or like the market successes that go on to then sell out and then reprint. You'll see that I would say that there's a visible difference in the rule book that says, okay, here's how you lay it out, and you can get it up and running within like 5 minutes of opening the box, right? And that I think that what will happen in the future is that if there is anything that's complicated in a setup that a diagram won't solve, and this is already starting to happen with how to play videos, but like there will be a link to say, here's how to set up everything, and we'll walk you through everything, like on just pull out your phone and we'll handle it, right? Mm-hmm. So
yeah, I definitely have seen a lot more. Like when I started gaming, I did not have like they didn't have like the rule, like here's the first game set up, or like even the components. Like nowadays it's pretty standard to have like this is this card, this is this tile, like so that just opening the first page of the book what all the different things are. And that's so helpful.
Yeah, even Kickstarters now are starting to lean into this idea. And I want to credit Kim Brebet. She kind of led this charge of like, I'm teaching them how to play the game in the process of showing them all of the components, which is a really, really smart thing. Even, when I think he first tried that with the first Unfair campaign, but like I've like latched onto that. And that is a huge thing, even when I'm helping Kickstarter creators format their actual campaign page, is that like get someone feeling, right? It doesn't need to be an actual reality of the situation, but have them feel like a zero to hero as they scroll through the page, right? Like I don't know anything about this game except that I want it because the art is great. I get to the page and as I'm scrolling down, oh, here is I'm gonna name a card, right? Like these are the character cards, and those character cards, you use those by implementing this new component, and then this new component, and then this new component, and you build on that so that someone has a fairly accurate idea of the game. Even that's already happening on Kickstarter pages, and then obviously much more so in the good rule books. I'll say there's plenty of bad rule books still, but the good ones are starting to come around where like I'm teaching the game as I show them what the components are and what they do.
Kathleen had another question. What should people spend money on, and what is less than necessary? I guess when buying games.
When they're under what context? So like when they're buying the manufacturing. I don't understand.
When designing a game.
Spend money on when they're designing a game. Yeah, that's a good question. What I think that everyone plays this balancing act of like, let's just say you're the designer, right? And you intend on not self-publishing, but you intend on pitching it to a publisher. I would argue that it does nowadays, how do I phrase this? If you are well connected in the industry and you have design credits under your belt, you can work less because the publisher will trust that you have at least the nugget of a great idea that will be, and this is just a relationship thing, right? And it exists in every industry. So if they've worked with you before, you can probably pitch them idea that is fleshed out to the point where they can play a few rounds. It can be very ugly, but it will be at least like they have the concept of the game nugget, and they might even sign that version of the game. If you are brand new, the publisher is just accepting random offers, you probably need to not spend money on art, but present an art direction from borrowed art. You can actually do this. This is a total legal thing. You're not selling any artwork, by the way. It's just a conversation between two people, and you don't own any of the art, and they don't own any of the art. You're just showing an artist will do this even. They'll say like, here's a bunch of reference art, and I'm going to use this reference art to create something new. I think a lot of designers get hung up on this. Like, I can't Google an image of a cat because I don't own the picture of the cat, but this game is about cats. And how do I depict that? I think a lot of designers like really do like worry about what they should do. It's like, no, like just grab all these images, put it on your game, explain that, never showcase that, by the way, publicly, that you are using this art, because again, I think that leans into unfair use of someone's creation. But like for your own personal use, you're very able to just grab some art, put it on the cards, and then present that to a publisher. The publisher is going to look at it and use that as a judgment of, okay, I understand where they're going with it. I know we don't own the art. We'll redo everything anyway, right? That's something that should happen. That I think a lot of new designers don't do. They still rely on the post-it that doesn't necessarily sell the game. Mm-hmm. So my short answer to the long answer is anything that will convince the publisher to work with you is, as a first-time designer, for sure. But then also, even that's still a relationship game that you should probably be having longer conversations with publishers in general and the industry in general to be if this is what you want to do in your life, right? Then you should be reaching out to publishers and asking them if they're accepting designs anyway, but also building that relationship.
Yeah. Well, I second the whole like build a relationship. It makes things so much easier, like from a designer and publisher standpoint. But also like there's enough like gameicons.net where it has a bunch of icons, plenty of free stuff to just use.
There's tons of free stuff. And yeah, they're not buying your game necessarily. They're buying also that I am going to have to work with this person, because there's plenty of publishers have been burned that way too. It's like, oh yeah, it's a great game, but the designer is a jerk and I don't want to deal with them. So, right. Like, the industry is super nice, but also like there are those situations where just people don't get along, and you want to make sure that you're getting hired for jobs. right?
Yeah, well, because there's so many people with game ideas out there that, like, at this point in time, I want to work with somebody that I can work with. Like, there's plenty of people, like, designers that can't take feedback from a woman, and so therefore I don't want to
Right.
work with them.
Absolutely. Absolutely that happens. So yeah, I guess the point is like be your best self and build relationships and let that lead the way versus just the design alone. You can be introverted. It's okay. You can still be introverted, a weirdo. I say that as an extrovert, by the way. I don't mean you're a weirdo. But you can be a introverted weirdo and still get games signed plenty by many publishers and still be a market success, a resounding market success. So
Yeah, just prove that you're not like a weirdo. Well, a weirdo in a bad way, like
right,
one that
right. There's
nobody
plenty of
wants
good weirdos. It's probably the lesson.
to. So another question came in. How much does a custom die cost compared to a regular die?
It will cost a little bit more because they have to make a plate. They have to build, literally the way they make this is that they will carve in an actual plate. Okay, so the way the way dice are made, the mass manufacturing of dice is that you have these two plates. Most of the time it's two plates. Sometimes there is options depending on the size of the die. It could be there could technically be a third plate, but most 99.9% of cases there will be two plates that come together. When they come together, the plastic is injected into that cavity that is formed by carving the plates, and then it opens and closes very quickly, right? And when it opens, it has dice in it that fall down. For dice, they're technically on a stem configuration, so like there's almost like a tree branch, and the fruit are the dice, and so they'll fall down into like a cooling pool, which is like in like a container. So they have a container that cools down the dice very quickly. And then once it's cool, then they will dig it out of the water, right? And then break off the sides. Actually, you can take any, I wish I had a die in front of me. If you, they'll usually will cover that connection point. But if you look in any corner, some of your dice on any one of the corners, you'll actually be able to see where the break-off point was. Even though it's smooth now, you should still be able to see that there was in the past some corner where the break-off point was. But anyway, so in order to do the custom die, they have to technically carve a whole new plate for you, which for dice isn't that expensive compared to like making a miniature. It's not as detailed work. So the actual plate that they make will not be as costly. It's hard for me to say like what an actual custom die would cost because of the variables of there is like a level of complexity that will go into what you're trying to show. And also they don't necessarily measure just that. They will measure, okay, what is the face going to be and how can I paint that? And also how many are they going to make over the course of this? Here's something I can teach people. When you're getting a quote for a game, if ever you're doing this, when you're getting a quote for a game, until you get to something like 3,000 units or like 4,000 units or 5,000 units, like the amount of cost savings that you're seeing reflected across the variations of print runs. So if I only do 1,500 units, how much does it cost? Versus if I only do 2,000 units, how much does it cost? Those little price breaks that you see have almost zero to do with the raw material cost of the game. All that's happening is that your labor cost is being spread across more units. When they turn on the machine, when they set up everything and they turn on the machine, that is a fixed cost that costs a pretty sizable amount nowadays. And the material is actually very, very small amount of that. So if you take into account that most manufacturers, their markup rate from how much it costs them is like 10%. So the price you see is something like they've built in, like they're getting paid the 10% out of that. And then everything else is labor to make your game, with a very, very small fraction of that to be the material cost, right? So when you see the price breaks up until, I would argue, like 3,000 or maybe in some cases it's like 5,000 for miniatures. Yeah, for miniatures it's higher. But what you're seeing in the price breaks is that all that's happening is that labor cost is just getting spread over more units, and you're actually not seeing, like, it's not costing them less to buy 500 more, material for dice.
That's really interesting, because like I never knew like why the price breaks happened.
Price breaks is just labor getting spread over more units, because it's still that same exact price that fixed cost, but it's just getting spread over more units now, and that's all that's happening.
Yeah, that's why like instead of doing like poker and bridge and mini cards, if you can do them all the same size, that means you'll have like less labor, because there's less different machines and different things being like put in the box.
100%, that is correct. Yep. Because a lot of people don't understand that, like, it's not, if you think of like a soda factory, right? A factory that produces soda is very, very automated. Everything is automated, and even to the point where, like, they drop off all the material and then nothing, like almost no humans interact with it from then on, besides to monitor some computer screens, right? But for games, there are so many manual processes. No one's making a machine to produce, like for instance, like I'll pick on you since you're interviewing me. Roar and Write, right? So Roar and Write, there's no one's like building a machine to make a bunch of Roar and Writes, because it's not going to be, you're not going to make like 100. I would hope that eventually you make 100,000 units, but right now, like we're talking, like, there's no one's going to invest in machinery that will make that on repeat over and over. For Monopoly, even, they have automated most of that, but even then, there's still people labor cost of making even Monopoly. So none of these indie creators are even close to that, making copies of their game. So there is an immense labor cost in making indie games right now.
Yeah, so streamline it and make things as the same as possible. So
same materials too. Like, a lot of people were like, I want to do something, and I'm gonna not pick on anyone, but like there are people who say, like, because of the gameplay, and this is like a totally valid decision, because of the gameplay, some of my cards need to be this stock and some of my cards need to be the other stock, and most of the time I'm going to tell you that is a mistake. If your gameplay warrants, like, I need this to be different card stocks, but otherwise you're going to be adding a labor cost that maybe isn't necessary.
Yeah, like if you need a higher stock, just make everything the higher stock, and that's probably cheaper, would you say?
Yeah, there is a person who's making a game where they're making tarot sides cards. Those cards are representing the map on the board. So you can imagine the table has a bunch of these tarot cards that are representing the map, and then has another set of cards that are supposed to represent these, I want to say, spaceships, or the characters, right? The characters on the map, and those cards need to hold information and hold pieces, right? That's why they're flat cards instead of like 3D elements, and then they will need to be collected at some point and then flipped, so to present new information. Anyway, all that being considered, there was a valid reason for going one card stock and then a different card stock for the ships. So that was that doesn't happen very often, which is exciting, but also it's going to add a cost to your production, which you will need to take account and then charge people more for that.
Mm-hmm. So another question that came in: what are your favorite types of game bits?
My favorite game bits. Oh, that's hard. I have some things that I wish that, like, people would do with games that maybe they're not doing. I like you'll see this in like toys a lot. Long Pack Games is also Long Pack Toys, which manufactures plenty of toys and fun stuff in that side of the industry, and toyetic components. So like Planet's a really good example of this, of like there is this toy component. Who else is doing? Pandasaurus just came out with Control and also Sonora, right? All of these like toyetic things that you're doing to achieve the game goal. But I probably like it when you can hold a big thing, a big toy in your hand. And this is probably like the Funko model, right? Where they're just collecting these items and they are, it's just plastic toys, but they're toys and you're collectibles. And then you factor in Funkoverse now that you can play a game with those toys. I like that I can hold in my hand something that's bigger than a little, even a die, right? Or a meeple. I feel that, like James Hudson gets a lot of sass from the internet for making Grim Forest when he was making Grim Forest, right? That like, why are there so many miniatures in this game that could be played without miniatures? I'm like, why is any game have miniatures in it if that's what your argument is, right? I was like, I want to hold a giant troll or whatever, a giant that's crushing a house or whatever. I want to hold that in my hand when I'm playing a game that's supposed to be like not a distraction, but like a immersive experience. So yeah, my favorite bits are probably the things that will fit in my giant bear claw hands is going to be my answer. But like toyetic is probably the right answer. And I want it to be a physical holding experience when I play a game.
So going back to the fiddly versus fun thing, where do you think that line is? Like, when does something become too fiddly to be fun?
Yeah, I think this is a can of worms, to be honest. My broad answer will be that the time that it takes to play your game should not ever result like in the history of your game, in the history of your playtesting, there should not be a dull moment, right? There's always this like dull moment that maybe happens with games that run too long. And I want to say that, I mean, there are maybe a number of contributing factors, the sameness of turns, right? But one of the huge reasons why this would ever happen is because your game is technically fiddly. If you have too many components for what the experience is, I'm sure someone has I would bet that if someone did a sorry, that's air conditioning. If someone did a how many bits does this game have versus how much time does the game advertise it taking, I would bet you can extrapolate that out of BGG and come up with some pretty interesting data and numbers, right? Like how many bits is actually in Catan, right? And how long do they say it takes to play a game? And that's probably a good measure of like what am I going to be dealing with and touching all the time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say like that works unless it's all like big chunky stuff that's super easy to figure out or
right.
Like,
but then there's no fiddliness, right? There's no fiddliness in that game, and you won't have to deal with that problem.
So now that we're in COVID and quarantine and everything, a lot of us are doing the majority of our playtesting over Tabletop Simulator.
Yeah, I feel for y'all. That's tough. That is a tough bargain, I think.
Yeah, it's the worst, but I'm getting used to it. But what are some physical aspects that you would say need to be you need to make sure to test outside of Tabletop Simulator?
Yeah, that's man. So there's tabletop games present this interaction experience that is not at all possible. I would argue even in VR, like not replicable in a video game, right? So even like I play Tabletopia all the time, and I play Tabletop Simulator all the time, and those are not board game experiences to me, right? So they're adjacent, right? And you can technically play a game that is the same rule set and the same artwork that the same possibly even, I would even argue like sometimes it's a more elegant solution right now, at least, right? A more elegant solution to a lot of games to play it online, but you need to experience the slowdown. I would argue the slowdown that happens naturally as part of. I mean, tabletop games are a slower, an intentionally slower experience than at nowadays, right? Obviously, there were board games before video games, and now that the video games sped up everything, right? There is a I don't want to say like a disconnect, because I am one of those people who will not get mad at you if you're on your phone during a game. That is fine to me. But there is a slowdown that happens as part of playing games that also needs to be in balance with how much fun is everybody having, right? So even when you're playtesting on Tabletop Simulator, I think the slowdown of this is very much mitigated, and you might think something is more fun than it actually is, because they're not dealing with the physical components and having to deal with, again, the Philoneos versus fun, or the how do I hold planet in my hand and look at it, and that is a very, very fun and rewarding experience that might be replicable on a video game, because if you just put it into a 3D engine, and I could spin it and like choose which thing I have, but like there is something that is slower and more deliberate, I would argue, and more puzzly, that happens that you cannot replicate with a video game.
Mhm. Yeah, it's definitely a different experience, and it's taken me like 4 months since the quarantine started to even be like willing to do tabletop simulator several times a week.
Sure, and that's a comfort level issue. Like, let's just say let's say there exists a publisher who has, since Tabletop Simulator has existed, or even before then, right, has developed their games online for remote playtesting, and even those people also need to experience the physical game at some point to make sure that all of these things that were solved in video games that speed everything up do not also break your game when it's on the table.
Mhm. Okay. Is there a connection between good table presence and physicality?
Of course, yeah. The games, and it's funny too, because like you'll know that there are publishers who will showcase a game that has really, really great table presence, even though they're selling multiple games that do very well for them. But the ones at the conventions, especially the ones on the outside corners that draw people in, are always going to be whatever the most grandiose off the table. I think maybe like 2 or 3 years ago, I was like, publishers need to come up off the table in order to stand out as part of this convention cycle. And at that time there wasn't Planet, there wasn't a number of games that have now. I think it was in reaction to, there was a scam account on Kickstarter that was I forget, Overlook or something like over something. But they came out with this 3D scenery that was part of the board game, and I was just like, this is that, I want that all the time. For every game possible, I want there to be 3D scenery in games, and collapse it or whatever, put it in a big box, whatever. That's what I want. I want that immersive experience. And it ended up not being a real campaign. It would end up being like a very, very high profile scam account. But that didn't take away from the fact that so many people put money into that. I was like, that is where the money is at. Get off the table and put people in as much as you possibly can. If you come off the table, then you can enter the game more easily, I think. So yes, I do think that the physicality of the game is very, very much tied to the what were we saying,
Table presence.
the table presence. The physicality of the game is such that I will be touching these things again, right? But they also need to drive in the immersive experience. So the physicality of coming up off the table, I think more specifically coming up off the table, is maybe one of the more important experiences that a gamer will have with your game.
Mhm. So one of the ways people do this is like making things out of chipboard. Like, well,
Sure.
Wingspan had like the dice tower in there, and like just
Everdell tree.
mhm.
The Everdell tree serves no function other than to come up off the table. Serves zero function gameplay wise. I don't know about the expansion. I haven't played with the expansions if they added any functionality to it, but it's literally a tree just to showcase as part of a convention cycle. And this is a really great move on their part, but it draws people in. It will sell more. You will sell more games as a direct result of you making a decision to bring more things up off the table.
So what are some of your other like favorite examples of this, like other than the Everdell tree?
Yeah.
What
So what are some good examples? Obviously, like you can go back even as early as like there is a Amerigo, that one. Amerigo has the cube tower, right? And that cube tower you drop stuff down, and then not everything makes its way out, and then you use those whatever randomized thing that comes out, and you grab those and you use them on the map in various ways, right? That's a huge, and that's maybe even before its time, right? And other games, Kickstarter games or otherwise, have copied this cube tower model in really interesting ways. You could even argue that, like, what's that game? Tower of Terror? Is that the one with the tentacles or whatever on it?
I'm not sure.
There is a game, Tower Madness. Tower Madness has you're holding up the sanity, right, inside this tower, and the only thing holding it up are all of these tentacle arms, and as you play the game will force you to pull out tentacles, and whatever falls through is information that you will then use to either like penalize characters or whatever. That is a very, very cool thing, and actually probably goes back to like an older toy. I wouldn't call this one a game, but an older toy that kids use of pulling out these sticks and see what falls through. So that's that one and Planet are probably my favorite examples of like the physicality of games.
So
coming up off the table, right?
So when you're doing these things, like, how do you make it the physicality not be seen as just a gimmick, or is like that okay? Like with Everdell just having the big tree. It's
okay. Don't be shy about gimmicks. Gimmicks are great. Everyone needs a gimmick. That's from a musical. But everyone needs a gimmick, and it is okay to lean into that gimmick as part of the selling of a game. It is okay, because like throw a burrito, right? Like, why are they throwing a burrito? Because it's funny. There's no reason it needs to be a burrito. It's just a thematic choice that is fun, because you're selling fun, right? So it could have been I think so I was there before it was a burrito, in their office or whatever. Longpack did make throw burrito, so I get to talk a little bit about this, but yeah, they were just using like squishy toys or whatever, just to use as like a physical object that would roughly be what ended up being the burrito. But yeah, I think they even said this in like an interview or something like that. I'm not giving anyone new information. I want to be careful about that. But in an interview they did, it wasn't a burrito before. It was like they went through very, very, maybe too many iterations of like, maybe it's a mango, maybe it's a taco, maybe it's a cat, right? And what they came up with was like, oh, well, just make it a burrito, because that'd be funny if someone threw a burrito at you in real life. And then they built the entire theming around that. You can see in the cards, right? It was very, very malleable, but the gimmick is that it's a burrito, and that happened to be what did well for them, right? And Exploding Kittens has done this many times, right? The You've Got Crabs game, you can buy these giant plastic crab arms as part of it. The Bears versus Babies, right? They had a box that was a furry box, right? That I had never seen before, but they made it happen. And then even to the point where like the Kickstarter version of Exploding Kittens, you opened the box and it let out a meow, I think, right? Something like that. These are all just like silly things that have nothing to do with very serious game design, but like will sell a game and also provide a fun experience for the customer. So why wouldn't you do it? Why wouldn't you do that?
I don't know. Like, well, I mean, maybe cost, but like, yeah, I'm like so excited on like all the things you went down. Like, how hard is it to make a sound when you open a box? Like, you'd probably have to have like not the traditional box, but maybe like an opener box.
It's very easy actually. It's very easy. All it is that you have a sound chip, and then that sound chip is pressure activated, but that pressure could be something as simple as the hinge of the box, right? When I open that, right, all it's releasing that tension, and then it makes a sound. It just triggers the sound. We've done that many times, like the Pac-Man game. We made the Pac-Man game, and then all that happens is when you push down. This is a gimmick again, arguably a very very cheap gimmick, but when you push down the Pac-Man character, it makes that eating sound that everyone knows from Pac-Man. Is a very nostalgic like blip sound, right? And there's no mechanical reason why that should exist except that people think it's fun and cute, and so it sells more games that the thing makes sound.
I mean, and like kids would have like so much fun with just like doing the sound over and over again. Well, even like
Just doing
adults.
the sound and not even playing the game. You're absolutely right. That is very, very true. Another physicality lesson in Pac-Man game. Everyone should go buy Pac-Man, by the way, not just because it benefits Long Pack, but because there are a lot of design cues within this that you can use in your own game design. They went back and forth many, many times with should this be a plastic or cardboard board for the game, and they ended up doing something where they made the plastic board because the pips that were going to be eaten as part of the game, they were able to integrate that into the board itself. So when the guy comes around and eats it, first of all, they're pushing it down, and the Pac-Man is going to eat that pip, but also the pip will actually disappear into the board as part of it getting pushed down, which is a huge like physicality lesson for anyone who thinks that, you know, every board should be cardboard and we will never advance past that. No, we already did it. Pac-Man game exists, and you can even change the board into plastic, because if there is a valid physicality lesson in that.
Like, I'm so excited for after we get done with this, where I'm just going to ask you all these questions about my game that I'm manufacturing with the Long Pack.
I love that.
now.
Yeah, I love it. I love this. Most of my job actually, when I'm not like you know, solving problems, whatever, I'm actually talking to a fair number of publishers who are just saying like, hey, like, what if I pitch this weird thing that Long Pack's never done? I'm like, oh, actually we have done that, and here's the game that we did it in, and we could totally replicate that in your game, right? We do all sorts of R&D with materials and components that you know nobody's using right now. Like nobody's using really like elastics in games. Like I'm talking about like a string that has elasticity and using that in some form of gameplay mechanism. You've seen a few of the flicking things, like you can fold something and flick it, or you can retract something and let it loose, right? But no one's using like in toys, they're using this all over, right? But like the elastic bands, and also everyone knows the 3D puzzles, right? Those 3D Puzz 3D or whatever. But no one's using that material in games, even though it's sometimes lighter than this heavy cardboard that comes in some of the games. And you could you imagine, okay, that material, it's cut into a puzzle. Well, what if it was not cut and you just had these pieces, right?
Mm-hmm.
These are all just like, I'm spitballing a little bit, but these are all things that are like, why aren't we doing this instead of that? Why aren't we doing this instead of that? Like a million times a day, just asking those questions. I posted on Twitter recently that you can technically print on plastic trays, right? So like not in the same sense that Fireball Island did. The way Fireball Island did it was they had a computer program that said, once we do the molding, once we make it into the Fireball Island, then it will look correct. So what we'll do is we'll print this on a flat sheet, and then when the molding comes up, then it will make it correctly, right? Like it will be very warped flat, but when they do the molding or when they do the heat, whatever, it will form into the island that then will be what people play on. What I'm talking about is after that molding happens, you can do very precision printing on the flat surfaces of any tray, which could, like, again, we're talking about speeding up, getting them zero to hero all the time. You can speed up the setup of a game by just having printing on a plastic tray that says, put this here, put this here, put this here, and there. Now they're ready to go. But no one's really using that, to be honest. I think Rurik did it. Someone commented on my tweet and said that one game had done it before, and it was very, very rewarding for people who play that game now. They were saying it has been done, and also it's a great experience.
So Kathleen wondered, what is the best thing that is a real pain to make?
The best thing that is a real pain to make are, yeah, that's a really, because I can answer that in different ways, because like a miniature that is overly complicated will cost a lot of money, and maybe you could have achieved the same, like, I am, as a person who loves giant minis and physicality of games, I also know that if you do not have a sculptor who knows, who is well versed in physical games, because there's a million like 3D sculptors out there who will give you a 3D design and say, yep, that's a 3D design. Technically, that could exist in the digital space. But when you're actually carving out the pieces and doing your cut lines, for anyone who is green to miniatures, the way it works is based on the complexity of a miniature, there will be so many different cut lines. The amount of cut lines that you create within a miniature, like let's say an arm, very, very simple idea, a person, right? So 2 legs and an arm, you know, and a head maybe. And so you have to do it in these small types of batches because of the nature of the way miniatures are made. But the idea is they will carve into a plate, and those plates also have to have like some millimeter of variance between each piece. So if you have too many cut lines, what you're actually doing is saying, okay, the head will go here, and then the arm will go here, and they also are holding this thing which will go here, and you'll eat up all of this plate space. And so they're very limited. I forget the exact, something like a foot by a foot or something like that. Imagine a plate is basically that size. And if you take up all of the space, then you have to expand into a second plate. If you expand into a second plate, then you're talking about like a $3,000 to $5,000 increase in price of your manufacturing costs. And plenty of people just do this, and you know, hats off to them for spending so much money and making that much money to stay in business. But like, if you can make it more manufacturable, streamline the miniature, and still capture people's attention with the size of the miniature, then that is a win. But most publishers don't, honestly. Like we have to tweak a lot of art files for 3D, I mean, with their permission and all that. But yeah, we have to tweak a lot of things in miniatures. So that's probably my answer, is that I really do love miniatures in games, but some digital sculptors are not as well versed with the physical miniature as it's made. So shop accordingly when you're hiring a miniature 3D sculptor.
Okay. If you worked on SlideQuest, what did you learn from that?
Oh, I love SlideQuest. SlideQuest, what did I learn? Okay. SlideQuest probably taught me that the box is a component, right? So like in SlideQuest, you're leveraging this arm on the box. You imagine like a seesaw, right? You leverage over the box lid, or sorry, the bottom lid. The arm will go like this, and if you have 4 of those on each side of the box, then what happens is this platform inside the box will start to move around and slide things around, sometimes into holes if you want them to land in the holes, but achieving some gameplay mechanisms by moving this 3D piece of plastic around within the box. And that makes the box actually a component in the game, which is cool, which is like, I love that. People should innovate like that more. And for the cost of like, it didn't cost them anything extra to, you imagine like a box that is flat, right? So like before they glue it all and make it into a 3D box, then it's lying flat and they're doing a die cut anyway to make that box. It's all custom. So instead of just coming down and making a normal box, all they did was say, okay, but also do an indentation. People do this all the time actually for like the thumb holes for boxes when you lift it up and they have like that half circle to make it easier to open the box. People do this all the time, but they did it in Blue Orange, crediting Blue Orange in this. They did it in a way that the die cut now is creating the box as a component of the game. Super cool. If you haven't played SideQuest, I highly recommend it. You should definitely play it. It's very cool.
Yeah, it is great. Like I played, I think like 5 or 6 maps, and like it's a co-op, but like it's a co-op where there's no alpha player because like you all have like a stick.
You can't, like it's just based on your own independent dexterity, and like you all are working towards a common goal, but like there's so many hijinks and elements that could get in the way. There's so much obstacles to navigate your, I think it's a knight or whatever, navigate the knight through this maze, and then also achieve the goals of like knocking other things into the holes or getting a heart or getting treasure, right? It's a very, very fun, really neat idea. I love those things where I'm like, I wish I thought of that. That's super cool.
So Matt had one last question. How has COVID and tariffs affected offshore manufacturing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It did affect, right? So like it has affected all of manufacturing, not just even in toys and games, right? All of manufacturing had to come to a standstill for about 2 to 3 months, right? So like I think most of them were in the 2-month mark. Of delays for existing products that were being manufactured. We have more or less caught up with that lag. The issue now is that because everything is shut down, you have a lot of publishers who are maybe being more conservative with their release cycle. And because of that, like technically business has slowed down. I mean, we're still making games and it's still churning out plenty. And to the point where like none of our staff is laid off or anything like that. But we do notice that there is a slowdown that we have to just roll with the punches on that. Luckily, we have enough business that is doing well. And also like Kickstarter is doing fine, right? They reported a bunch of losses and they had to fire people, but like people are still funding many games on Kickstarter right now that are doing just fine. And then on top of that, like, the sales of games online have obviously shifted away from the physical locations, and that's an unfortunate thing. And I'm not trying to draw any comparisons, right? Because I am a firm believer in the friendly local game shop that is your almost like your third place, right? That you always hear about that. Your third place, you're the place where you're not sleeping or working, and I believe in that concept. But in light of the pandemic, buying habits have shifted away from maybe the obscure thing you would have bought in one of those stores, right? Compared to a safe purchase online where like it's the number one thing selling on Amazon. So yeah, I'll get it, right? Like, and I think those sales are doing very well, but you have to be manufacturing those ones to see that benefit, right? We are making a few of those actually, but you still have to be the manufacturer to benefit from that. So, I mean, some manufacturers are going to be hurting more than others, and that's just part of this whole weird time that we're living in.
Indeed. So it's 3:00. Any last thoughts that you wanted to share?
Yeah, let me tell them about Planet real quick before we go up. Okay, so Planet, it came to us in this like lock key mechanism. So like the way it was presented to the publisher, the designer was presented to a publisher was you had this cardboard piece that would go into a I think it was like a paper mache sort of design, right? And you would put that piece in there and lock it in with like another cutout, right? And then when you locked it in, that represented the item, the landscape that the animal then could then, you know, based on the scoring. When you play Planet, the scoring is such that you have a certain amount of desert, let's say, and there's an animal that needs this amount, the most desert, and you're comparing the globes against your opponents. And if you have the most desert, you will recruit that animal onto your planet. It evolved. It has the best chance of evolution onto that planet. Anyway, so after that lock key thing, we went to the drawing board. The publisher literally said, Longpet, are you able to even like attack this at all? We're like, yeah, we can make this. It might need to be plastic, but we will be able to make this, and you will be able to sell this game. And so they signed the game, and then we went to work on manufacturing. And what ended up being the best case scenario at the time was that we were going to do a 3D hexagon shaped thing, and we would also have stickers of magnetic circles. And those magnetic circles ended up being, I'm telling you this because it's never ending, this idea of improving the physicality of a game. But we have these stickers, but that was such a high labor cost, because imagine somebody putting those magnetic stickers on 12 times, and there's 4 globes in every game, and they made, however many thousands of units. Imagine how many times someone's putting a sticker, that's a person, by the way, putting a sticker on the outside of these globes. So, okay, how do we lower the production cost of this game? So then the second edition of Planet comes out, and what we did was we actually took this tin flower design. The reason why you can't do tin most times because the outsides will rust. I mean, you can't protect against that, except unless you can curl it into itself. A lot of you can imagine like pins do this, like a lot of pins that you would wear. They do this, or buttons, right? But for this game, we couldn't do that. And also if it gets rough and stuff, so we're using like stainless steel for those stickers. But the tin was a cheaper option, because of material, but also because if you cut it into like a flower shape and fold it into a bottom half of that hexagon, and then what you do is you can mold it so that it will poke out of these holes now that are on the hexagon, and then you can psionically weld it to seal in the metal to the plastic. And obviously all this goes through rigorous safety testing, but now what you have is the sealed thing. There's the bubble of the magnet that comes out of the hole that will then, you have the fridge magnet, which represents the landscape, that will stick on that. And that is the story of why Planet exists as it stands. There's a lot of research and development, but it ended up being something where now Blue Orange, and they were selling it for a profit beforehand, but now they have a decent margin for selling it. I think they sell it like $25 on Amazon or something like that. Or I think that's the MSRP is $25. They can sell this game for $25 and make a profit. And that is huge. It's huge thinking about the type of game that it is.
Yeah, like any game that has physical things you can touch, and it's $25. That is amazing.
Mm-hmm. I think they're able to do it that way because of the scale that they're operating at. I don't know that an indie designer is going to necessarily do that on their first Kickstarter, because they're not going to achieve the numbers to make that make sense. But Blue Orange is established big enough to take on this idea. So if you're pitching, right, don't shy away from this idea that you can be in the physical space, right? Maybe that's the lesson to take away from this. If you're designing a game that we will be pitched to a publisher such as Blue Orange, right? Then don't, especially for Blue Orange too, because they lean into this toyetic idea of games, don't be shy when it comes to that. Challenging what is a game, and also where do I hold this game, and what is the why am I holding it in my hand versus it being on the table? Is probably a good lesson for people to take away from this.
So Kathleen had a follow-up for that. What's the general number of games in order to have the big discounts?
It depends on the material is the short answer, but Like if you were just making a card game, then I would say that I'm going to say like as a broad answer, if you hit the 3,000 mark, then you're probably going to start to see bigger increases or bigger how do I say it? It will start to level off. So the way a discount scale would work is if I'm making one game, it costs a huge amount, right? If I'm just going to make one copy of a game, it costs a large amount of money, right? Because the labor cost is not spread across any units. But then the labor cost, as it goes down, right? It'll always go down, but it will start to level off. And when it starts to level off, arguably at like 3,000 to 5,000, maybe more than that for those giant like CMON miniature type games. Maybe more units are required, but at some point you would actually see this level off in a game if you start to expand past whatever. When it gets to the point where you're making as many, I don't know, throw burritos or exploding kittens, right? Exploding kittens operates on the scale where like a penny matters, right? Once a penny matters for the amount of cards that you're going to make, because a penny for 100,000 units or 200,000 units, that's a lot of money, right? What's math, something. That's a lot of money. So I would say you don't need to worry about that as an indie creator, where the break-off points are. If it's publishable, then a publisher will take on that project, and they will be in long conversations with their manufacturer, and whether or not it's feasible to make it, even maybe before you get the contract to sign the game, right? Like they will maybe contact the publisher, or the publisher will contact the manufacturers, like, is this possible? Like, can we do something with this concept? Because we'd like to make it. We have these conversations all the time, especially at conventions when they're getting pitched anything anyway. You'll see something where like the designers are all going around doing their pitches, right? And then so a publisher will be like, let me hold on to this. Let me hold on to this, especially if it's like a weird concept, right? Let me hold on to this, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. But I need to hold on to this in order to do it. What they're doing is they're just taking it over to the manufacturer. Is this possible? Can we do this cost effectively? And then they will get an answer, hopefully right then and there. If they can't get an answer right then and there, then you see all these delays. And like, especially if they really want to publish it, then you'll see some people walk away with like, oh yeah, they're very interested, and a week later it's signed. So those things happen all the time.
So where can people find you after this?
Yeah, so you can, I always recommend people to join Tabletop Backer Party because we're having fun in there. But you can, I'm on Twitter at Zayas Games. I'm also, yeah, you can, Tabletop Backer Party is the best place to go. You'll find me in many spots, but Tabletop Backer Party is the best one. You can go to facebook.com/Tabletop Backer Party, and that will be it. You should also like Long Pack Games on Facebook or wherever social media you use. That way you can keep up with the latest updates of games that we're making. Okay.
Well, thank you all for being here, and thank you so much, Daniel, for like having all the knowledge on physical things.
I'm just interested in it. That's all it is. I'm interested in the physicality games.
And I hope you all have a great weekend. If you want to continue the conversation, we're on Discord at weirddraftgames.com/Discord. So thank you all. See you later.
Bye.